The Edmonton Oilers are once again off to an awkward start in October. Is it bad luck, or is this actually who they are?
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Tuesday edition of Locked On Oilers. I am your host, Nick Zararis. This is my 10th season doing digital hockey content, my 4th as a host here on the Locked On Podcast Network, and I want to thank everyone that is making Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers is a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where we've got your team covered every single day. And today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com, and you can win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So on today's show, we are going to be breaking down the Oilers' dilemma. So to start things out, we're going to look at just the raw numbers. We will start out with the underlying numbers. I will walk you through where the Oilers are at, both in terms of share and rate. So we'll talk about quality and quantity. Then in our second segment, we will be pivoting to a conversation about what low event hockey means in 2025. And then to tie a bow on today's show, we're going to talk about what that means for Kris Knoblauch and the decisions he's going to have to make about this group going forward, and some ideas I have as far as who I think should be playing with who. So to start things out, we are going to dive into some of the underlying numbers. And some of these concepts can be a bit tricky or daunting if you're unfamiliar with them. But we have baseline statistics. You know what a goal is, you know what an assist is, you know what a hit, a block shot, a face-off one. You understand how those statistics work. They are measuring a single component of a hockey game. These underlying numbers we're going to discuss are more descriptive than goals, assists, shots on goal, etc. The value in these numbers is they are able to give you color and detail within a given game, because not all shots on goal are worth the same. And we'll start out with the lowest common statistic, and that would be a scoring chance. A scoring chance is any time a player releases a puck in the general direction of the net. That can be shots that miss the net entirely, that get blocked, that go off the iron, or that ultimately culminate in shots on goal. But not all scoring chances are shots on goal. All shots on goal are scoring chances, but you get what I'm saying. It's like a rectangle and square type situation there. So to start things out, the Oilers are getting 50.5% of the scoring chances in their games. That is middle of the pack. That is 16th in the NHL. That is a perfectly adequate number. That means the Oilers are having slightly more offensive zone time, because to generate those scoring chances, you need to be in the other team's offensive zone. Rates-wise, and this is where we start getting to the idea of low-event hockey, they're creating 54.42 scoring chances per 60 minutes at 5-on-5, at even strength. That's 23rd in the NHL. That is on the lower end. That means there aren't as many scoring chances in the Oilers games, but of the scoring chances that are in their games, they are generating slightly more than half at 50.5%. So lower event, fewer opportunities to score. Next up, we alluded to it before, we're going to talk about shots. And you know what a shot on goal is. It's got to be on the net. It's got to be saved or go into the net. But other than that, this one is pretty straightforward. This is an area that provides even more color. So we said the Oilers were 16th in scoring chances for. In terms of shots for share at 54.8%, they're top 5. They're 5th in the NHL in percentage of shots on goal in a game at 5-on-5. That tells you that even if the Oilers aren't creating a ton of scoring chances, a majority of the scoring chances they create are ending up on goal. They are getting through. That has a tricky way of manifesting, and we'll get there in our second segment, and we'll talk a little bit more about that going forward. But when we talk about rates, they're coming in at 14th, 27.39 shots on goal per 60 minutes at 5-on-5. Again, shots on goal in of themselves are not inherently valuable. That's why we're going to get to quality of scoring chances coming up in a second here when we talk about expected goals and high danger chances. But none of these numbers are inherently disqualifying. Now, playing at a slower pace, the way they are at checking in at 22nd in scoring chances per 60, that makes your game a little more volatile and prone to one or two plays dictating the outcome of the game. A handful of things ultimately end up swinging those games when you are in these lower environments. Then goals for 26. They have 44% of the goals for so far at 5-on-5. When it comes to the rate, they are scoring 1.91 goals per game at 5-on-5. That is 28th in the NHL. So they have some zone time. They're getting shots on goal, but they're not going in the net. Why is that? Now we can go to the descriptors. So 50.9% of the expected goals. And if you're new around here, if you're not an everydayer, expected goals are simply a measure of how likely a scoring chance is to result in a goal. It's based on data that the NHL tracks from each spot on the ice. There is an implied value from that spot on the ice based on how many shots from that spot have gone in the past. So the more valuable a scoring chance, you think about those ones in and around the net front where a guy's only got to broom it in, those are going to be the most valuable. Those are going to be the ones worth the most. And the Oilers checking in middle of the pack 15th. So they're not getting a ton of overall scoring chances. These are lower event games. They're getting pucks on net, but they're not particularly dangerous. And then you look expected goals you look at the rate of expected goals, and they're checking in at 26. Again, that supports our overarching theory, our overarching point that the Oilers are becoming a low event hockey team. These games are being swung on a handful of plays, and we don't have a ton of overall scoring chances. We don't have a ton of dangerous scoring chances. High danger chances, they have the 14th highest share at 50%. They are creating the 31st most high danger chances at 5-on-5. That is telling you this group is not getting the puck to dangerous enough areas. They're 29th in shooting percentage because they are shooting a lot of low-quality shots. When they are shooting these low-quality shots, sure, they're going to get on the net and it counts in the expected goal ledger. But without those high-danger chances, you are becoming a fangless offense. You don't have push. You don't have bite. And it creates a really tricky situation if you're Kris Knoblauch. And we talked about this pretty extensively after the Vancouver loss yesterday, but right now, Kris Knoblauch can't get his guys going the way he wants to. And he has two options to try and coax better performance out of them. It's either A, we keep juggling the lines until we find something that works, or B, we double and we triple down on our principles and try and get to whatever we're supposed to be doing structurally. But right now, I'm telling you, the way the Oilers are playing is flat out not good enough. They have a minor majority share of scoring chances, of expected goals, of high danger chances, but a very low rate of them. When you are not getting to as much offense as you have, and the Oilers traditionally have been an offense-first team that concedes some defense for offense, that is willing to do what it takes to create dangerous offense, get pucks in on net, get pucks in deep, it creates a complicated system now, a complicated feeling. Because Kris Knoblauch has them playing this way, kind of by necessity, because they are lacking in goal scoring, because they are lacking in proven NHL goal scoring. So with that in mind, he has opted to try and put more on the plates of the guys he trusts, like McDavid, like Draisaitl, to a lesser extent, Brian Nugent-Hopkins. I think some of this will be resolved when Zach Hyman comes back, which could be as soon as this weekend, maybe early next week, the latest. But you get Zach Hyman back in the mix, and Zach Hyman is going to take some time to get up to game speed after not having played a hockey game since the end of May. You get him in the mix, I think your capacity for creating more dangerous offense goes up, and that should solve some of these issues. But no mistake about it. Right now, the Oilers aren't playing hockey the way we're used to, and it's pretty weird. We are going to take our first break on today's edition of Locked On Oilers. When we come back, we're going to talk about what these numbers actually manifest as when you are watching a game right after this. Let's be honest, most of us can't even name all our financial accounts, let alone what they're worth. Between 401ks, savings, and investments, it's easy to lose track, and that can mean leaving money on the table. That's why I started using Monarch, an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or phone. Monarch helped me organize my accounts, track my spending, and get a better handle on my investments. And most gratefully, I am not using a spreadsheet to monitor it. I love that I can review every component of my financial plans. I can set up goals for my savings or my investments. And Monarch's virtual dashboards make it so easy to understand where my money's going and make it work harder for me. Do not let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarch.com for 50% off your first year. One more time, that's monarch.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Thank you so much to everyone who is hanging out on this Tuesday edition of Locked On Oilers. We'll have an episode for you after the game tonight, and we'll hopefully be talking about how the Oilers have addressed some of their concerns. But when you think about how you would solve problems as a coach, you start to run into impasses. You start to run into things you can't change, you can't modify. So when Kris Knoblauch got an idea of the players he was going to have at his disposal this summer, he had one of two options. And we discussed this after the Vancouver game, if you didn't get a chance to listen to Monday's episode. But as the Oilers have lost foot speed, as the Oilers have lost transition guys like McLeod, like Holloway, like Warren Fogle, when you have lost foot speed and you have to work harder for your offense, that has a trickle-down effect. If you can't get that first breakout pass from your defenseman up to that forward who can attack the offensive zone with speed, you have to reassess what you're doing in transition. And transition is where the NHL is won and lost today. Yes, you do ultimately need to put the puck into the net, but the better you are, the better your transition operation is of going defense, neutral zone, offensive zone, dangerous offense. The smoother you are in getting through those three phases of the game, the better your hockey team. And right now, the Oilers, and I know they have tried to address some of their foot speed issues. I do think Jack Roslovic is a good example of the limitations of being a good skater. He had a nice goal on Sunday against Vancouver. He made a nice play on the forecheck, so I don't want to get on the guy. But that shows you that just necessarily having raw foot speed doesn't mean you're going to be able to be a particularly impactful NHL player. But it is an example of the Oilers understanding a deficiency. But as you think about what the Oilers have been good at over the years, you think about all of the ways in which they are able to use space, width, and getting plays in tight to the net front, cross-seam passes to create dangerous offense, it doesn't seem to be getting to the same place. And Bob Stauffer had said this during the intermission report against Vancouver on Sunday. Sometimes you just want your best players to shoot. Sometimes you just want your best players get the puck to the net and whatever happens, happens. And I should say, I hate that type of analysis. Sitting here as someone who has been a hockey fan, just a sports fan in general for a long time now, I hate it when people try and tell the professional athletes what to do. They're the professional athlete. Our view of the game is so different on TV or watching from the seats. We have such a better understanding of positioning and spacing from our typical viewing than what a player does when they're actually in the moment and they have to make those split-second decisions. And that's why, even though I'm citing as an example, it frustrates me because I can't put myself in Connor McDavid's shoes in that situation and understand his processing. His brain operates on a level the rest of us can't comprehend. You would drop that in my head and it would tilt over because it would be too heavy. That dude's brain is incredible, and it's what enables him to play with the tempo he's able to and the velocity of his decision-making, where he is constantly one step faster than everybody else because his processing is so good. But in terms of the actual number, converting scoring chances to shots on goal, that's a real challenge for some teams. Some teams, especially these dump and chase, high to low cycle teams, they have a hard time scoring goals consistently because the shots they generally create aren't that dangerous. When you're settling for point shots, when you're settling for shots from the flanks, you are limiting your capacity to convert into dangerous offense, and that manifests in the Oilers' numbers. When they have such a good share of shots on goal at 54.8%, but they're only 50% of the expected goals, 50% of the high danger chances, and they only have a 6% shooting. That tells you they are not getting nearly as much dangerous offense as we're accustomed to seeing. And I do think Zach Hyman is a big part of that because he creates such dangerous offense for himself, where he's typically parked out both at 5-on-5 and on the power play. But in terms of where this is showing up now, the Oilers want those cross-seam passes. They want to pass the puck circle to circle. They want to make the other team's goalie move. They want to make the other team's defenders move, because you get those guys in space. You get those guys on islands where they have to make a decision. Then you can start to take advantage. And you saw a little bit of that on the McDavid to Draisaitl goal on Sunday night on the power play, where McDavid was able to use width to draw, to space those defenders out, and to get the puck to a dangerous area where Leon was able to bang it home. But at 5-on-5, with transition play not manifesting, the Oilers are having to work significantly harder for offense. And the one thing I would add on to what I had just said about dangerous offense, let's say you gain the offensive zone and you don't have puck support, and we were talking about that pretty extensively on Monday's show too. You need to make yourself available to your teammates, whether that's to be in a shooting lane or that's puck support in a board battle to win a 50-50 puck. You need to have guys in those spots. And when you don't have that, your options start to become a little more limited. And you get those sequences where a player will carry the puck into the offensive zone. There will be 3 or 4 defending players, and he won't have anything he can do. He'll just send the puck in and go off for a change. Instead, if he has support, maybe we have a drop pass, maybe we have a cross-team pass, we have something to do dangerously. Or in the case of just gaining the offensive zone and not even getting a shot off, that's also a byproduct of not necessarily having the smoothest offensive zone operation, of not having guys in positions to give proper puck support. And if you do all the work of going from the defensive zone through the neutral zone, gaining the offensive zone, and you're only able to generate one low-quality scoring chance, and then the other team wins the puck off the shot, they go the other way, and they maintain offensive zone time for a little while, you are losing the possession within the game. And that, on a shift-by-shift basis, is not that big a deal. If you lose a couple shifts here and there, that's part of the game. That's a natural part of the ebbs and flows of a hockey game, that some shifts you're going to be better, some shifts the other team's going to be better. But your key is you want to have more good shifts than the other team does. You have 2/3, you have between 50 and 60% of the good shifts in a hockey game. You win between 50 and 60% of the minutes in a given hockey game. You're going to have an awfully good chance to win. And right now, the Oilers don't have the process. It would be one thing if they were getting burned on shooting luck, but they're not generating dangerous offense. So they have a low shooting percentage because a lot of their shots on goal aren't likely to result in goals. And because, frankly, and this is the problem, they don't have a lot of shooting talent. Beyond McDavid, beyond Draisaitl, I'll give you Roslovic, who's an above-average goal scorer. They don't have a lot of finishers. They don't have a lot of guys who can just let it fly. And it's the most valuable trait. It's the most valuable skill in our league today. Guys who put the puck in the net, regardless of the baggage, regardless of the contract, they will get taken care of. If you put the puck in the net consistently and show you can do it in a variety of situations with different types of line mates, you are worth your weight in gold. You will stick around. You will continue to get opportunities. And speaking of opportunities, coming up next on today's edition of Locked On Oilers, I'm going to tell you what I would like to deploy the lineup as, at least in terms of who plays with who, and why I think the Oilers still probably have work to do as far as both how they want to play and what they need going forward. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of games or you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. NBA, I don't know who's good yet. We've only got a week into the season. The Thunder are the betting favorites to repeat as champs at plus 210. If you're looking for something a little spicier, you could talk me into the Cavaliers at plus 650, or hopefully, God willing, my Knicks at 11-1 to win the whole thing. That would be quite the story. And right now, FanDuel's giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com, sign up, and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you so much to everyone who is hanging out on this Tuesday edition of Locked On Oilers as we are walking our way through what low-event hockey looks like in 2025. And I use that phraseology, that terminology of in 2025, because 5 to 10 years ago, this is where the NHL was at. If you go and look at the rosters of the St. Louis Blues, the Capitals, those Penguins teams, to a lesser extent, those Kings teams, those Darryl Sutter Kings teams that won Stanley Cups in the 2010s, this was how they did it. It was defense, it was goaltending, it was situational goal scoring, it was outworking your opponents, it was playing the game down in their end, it was cycling the puck, it was working high to low. And then in the last few years, as teams, especially the good ones, have been able to load up on these high-end players, you think about the Tampa teams that have gone back, that went back-to-back, Florida, Vegas, Colorado, really high-end skaters, really strong shooters of the puck. The way those teams have requisitioned or tweaked this is now they have certain lines in their lineup that play this style of hockey. This is what you want your third and fourth lines to look like. If your third line had these underlying numbers of slightly, if they had slightly better goal share, I would say, but 50% of scoring chances, 54% of shots on goal, 50% of expected goals, 51% of high danger. If you were able to manifest that from your third and fourth lines, and your top six is able to play with tempo, with dangerous offense, with left to right lateral passes, with those cross seam passes that get goalies and defenders moving. That's what we saw last year in the playoffs from the Oilers. Their super line, where they were playing McDavid, Draisaitl, and Hyman together in the Vegas series and late in the Kings series. Then that Nuge, Evander Kane line that was cooking in terms of forecheck, pressure, controlling offensive zone. You want to have a little bit of both. And right now, unfortunately, the Oilers have pretty much everybody playing this way. And some of that, I think, is a product of just guys trying to get a feel. And we have all season to bemoan Kris Knoblauch going to the line blender at every conceivable moment. I definitely am starting to get tired of it. I saw a stat earlier that every team on average has 3 lines that have played more than 30 minutes so far, other than the Oilers. And that lack of consistency in who's playing with who does start to wear on you. It does start to make it harder to find connection, to find synergy. And like we were talking about in our opening segment, transition play is a real challenge, and it can come down to effort at times. It can come down to discipline at times. Are guys going to make themselves available for breakouts? Are guys going to make themselves available for passes to shots? And all of this is inherently interconnected. And I do want to emphasize that yes, the Oilers have several different phases of their team that are not really clicking all at once. And when one doesn't click well, that impacts another and another. And it's like a finely tuned watch. All those gears need to be turning in the same way to keep everything on time and in sync. But what I would like to see McDavid with Nuge and with Ike Howard for now. When Zach Hyman comes back, he goes into the Howard spot. Or we do Mangiapane, Hyman, McDavid. Those are the combinations I like there. I would like to see more of Draisaitl with Roslovic and or Savoy and Podkolzin. We know Draisaitl and Podkolzin works. Let's stick with it. McDavid, we know him and Hyman works. We're going to stick with it. Now, this is where it starts to get tricky, because if you're playing Savoy in the bottom 6, that means he's got to play with Henrique and Frederic. And neither of those guys have the goal-scoring chops, have the offensive instincts, have the real capacity to be good complementary players for Savoy, which means likely Savoy needs to be on that second line or on that first line. And what that does to the rest of your lineup, the trickle-down effect becomes a challenge. Right now, Kris Knoblauch needs to find one combination he likes and go from there. He needs to weed out some of the possible combinations, but I want to see McDavid with Howard. I want to see Draisaitl with Podkolzin and with Savoy, or with Roslovic, because I do think the skill sets there are in good alignment. And then the bottom six, it's going to be piecemeal. I mean, we knew this team lacked proven goal scorers. I mean, if you go and watch a random episode from July or August, there's a good chance that's what the subject of that episode is to some degree, that we're talking about how the Oilers need to replace goals that have gone out the door over the last 2 years and how they haven't done it with proven guys. And look, there's a lot of time left for guys like Tomashek, for Howard, for Savoy, for Noah Philp, for guys who don't have big track records. This is kind of the situation where if you get lucky once, you can ride the hot hand into a role. And even if it's not a big one, if you can chip in occasionally and parlay that into full-time playing time, that's an accomplishment. That's something you can feel good about. And for right now, the Oilers are not in dire straits. It is not even American. It's not even Halloween. American Thanksgiving is still well about a month away. If the Oilers are still this disjointed, if they are still not creating dangerous offense to this degree a month from now, then we can have an honest conversation that this team is broken, it's screwed, they need to get 3 or 4 new forwards in here. And all of that very well might turn out to be true. But we need more evidence before we can make a final determination. And you know what would help gather that as evidence? If we had big enough sample sizes. So Kris Knoblauch, please play your forwards with the same guys for an extended period of time in a given game over the course of a few. It would greatly help our understanding of your hockey team. But that will just about do it for today's edition of Locked On Oilers. Thank you so much to everyone that made Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers is a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where we've got your team covered every single day. Be sure to check out Locked On NHL Game Night, breaking down every game every night until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned in June. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts or over on YouTube. Ditto for us here at Locked On Oilers. Leave the show a 5-star review if you're listening on Apple or Spotify. For those who've jumped on board since the start of the season, greatly appreciated. I will see you guys tomorrow. Until then, let's go Oilers.